Zanil lived for attention. Everything about her was deliberate. The car she drove, the perfume she wore, the way she walked into a place like she owned it. She worked in one of the biggest companies in the city and believed the world revolved around her beauty and success. Every weekend, she shopped at an expensive supermarket where only the wealthy went. That place was her stage, and she loved it. Each time she stepped out of her car, people turned to look at her. She loved their stares. She fed on them. By the supermarket gate sat a beggar, a quiet man who had become part of the background. He never spoke, never begged loudly, and never looked angry. He just sat with his bowl beside him, waiting. Most people ignored him. Those who noticed only dropped coins and walked away. Zanil saw him every week. To her, he was a reminder of everything she had escaped: poverty, hunger, shame. She hated that reminder. One morning, she looked at him and felt disgusted. Without stopping, she pulled out a coin from her purse and tossed it toward him as if she was throwing trash. It rolled on the ground, and she kept walking, proud of her own generosity. Inside the supermarket, she took her time shopping. She greeted the cashier loudly so everyone would notice her designer handbag. She moved slowly down each aisle, smiling at her reflection on the shiny friezes. When she finally stepped out, the beggar was still there, still calm, still sitting in silence. She placed her shopping bags in her car, took one last look at him, and drove off. To her, he was nothing, just another face she would never remember. That night, as she removed her makeup and scrolled through social media, she saw motivational quotes about humility and kindness. She smiled, posted a picture of herself at the supermarket, and added a caption, "Always be good to others." She didn't believe the words, she just wanted the likes. Days turned into weeks, and the same routine continued. Each Saturday, Zanil arrived at the supermarket, parked in the same spot, and walked past the same beggar without care. Sometimes she dropped a coin. Other times she ignored him completely. To her, he didn't exist. But something began to change. One morning, she noticed the man wasn't there. The spot by the gate was empty. The bowl was gone. She walked past, pretending not to care, but she felt something unusual, a small sense of discomfort she couldn't explain. For the first time, she noticed that her Saturdays felt strange without seeing him. She didn't know why. Maybe she had gotten used to his presence, or maybe life felt too quiet without someone beneath her to look down on. She shopped as usual, but her mind was elsewhere. Who was that man? Where did he go? She tried to shake off the thought, but it followed her home. At night, she lay on her bed scrolling through her phone, but she couldn't stop thinking about that empty space by the gate. It bothered her. A few days later, while reading an article online, she came across a story about a local foundation feeding the homeless. The photo attached to the story made her freeze. In the corner of the image stood a familiar face, the man who used to sit by the gate. Only this time, he looked completely different. He was clean, well-dressed, and surrounded by volunteers handing out food to children. His smile looked peaceful, confident, nothing like the man she remembered. Zanil stared at the photo for a long time. Her mind refused to accept it. How could that be the same person? She shut down her phone, but her heart refused to rest. From that moment, something inside her began to shift. She started noticing people she used to ignore: the cleaner sweeping the office floor before anyone arrived, the old woman who sold fruit near the traffic light, the watchman who stood outside in the rain. She had passed them 1,000 times, but now she saw them differently. They looked human. Still, pride is not easy to kill. When her company announced it had been acquired by a larger international firm, Zanil saw it as her big break. The new management meant new opportunities, and she was ready. She updated her resume, rehearsed her introduction, and told herself she was destined to rise even higher. The new CEO was arriving in 2 days, and everyone in the office was anxious to meet him. Rumor had it he was young, successful, and had built his empire from nothing. Zanil smiled. She believed such people respected ambition, and she had plenty of that. On the day of the introduction, the office was bright and busy. The management team lined up near the entrance as a convoy of cars pulled in. Zanil stood among her colleagues, her heart beating fast, her confidence shining as always. The car door opened, and the new CEO stepped out. The moment she saw his face, her world stopped. It was him. The man who used to sit by the gate. The man she had mocked, pitied, and dismissed as worthless. He walked past her with quiet authority, not even looking her way. Her body froze. Her mind went blank. Every memory she had of him flashed before her. The coin, the mockery, the arrogance. As he walked into the building surrounded by senior executives, Zanil felt her chest tighten. For the first time in her life, she felt small, smaller than she had ever made anyone feel. When the meeting ended that day, people celebrated the new boss. Zanil sat alone at her desk, staring at her computer screen, unable to type. She couldn't shake the image of him. She couldn't believe how life had turned. That night, she drove home without music. The city lights blurred through her tears. She had spent her life judging people by what they wore, what they drove, and where they stood. But now, everything she believed in had been shattered by a man she once looked down on. She sat on her bed and finally cried. Not because she had seen the man again, but because she realized what she had become. Zanil didn't sleep that night. She kept replaying the moment he stepped out of the car. Clean suit, wristwatch shining, surrounded by people who now called him sir. The same man she used to throw coins at. Her heart pounded each time she remembered how he looked past her like she was invisible. It hurt more than she expected. Pride had been her armor for years, but that day, it cracked. The next morning, she arrived at work early, something she never did. She wanted to prove she was still relevant, still valuable. But the moment she walked into the office, the whispers began. Did you see the new CEO? He's so humble. They say he was once poor but now owns companies in South Africa and Kenya. Zanil's body stiffened. Every word cut deep. She wanted to scream, to walk out, to disappear. When the meeting began, the CEO stood in front of everyone and spoke with calm authority. His name was Mr. Nhlanhla Masco. He introduced himself like a man with nothing to prove. His voice was steady, his words sharp and thoughtful. Everyone clapped. Zanil forced a smile. When it was her turn to introduce herself, she stood, smiled nervously, and said, "Good morning, sir. I'm Zanil, the head of marketing." His eyes met hers, just for a moment. Calm, unreadable. Then he nodded slightly and turned away. That small gesture destroyed her inside. For the first time, Zanil realized that being ignored could hurt more than being insulted. After the meeting, she sat quietly in her office. Every sound, the printer, the footsteps, the phone ringing, irritated her. She couldn't focus. She wanted to speak to him, to apologize, to explain herself. But how? What would she even say? That evening, when everyone left, she stayed behind. Through the glass wall of her office, she saw him still working. His assistant had gone, yet he sat there, typing on his laptop, focused and calm. Zanil walked toward his office door, but her legs froze halfway. Fear gripped her. She turned back, picked her bag, and walked out. Outside the building, she stood by her car and wept silently. Her pride was breaking piece by piece, and she didn't know how to stop it. The next few weeks were torture. Mr. Masco treated everyone fairly, but Zanil could tell he deliberately avoided her. He praised other department heads, delegated tasks, encouraged teamwork, but he never looked her in the eye. Every time she passed him in the hallway, her chest tightened. Every time he spoke in meetings, she found herself watching his every move, wondering if he remembered her from those supermarket days. One afternoon, she finally got her answer. He called a few staff members into his office for a strategy discussion. She was one of them. As they took their seats, he stood by the window, arms folded, and asked everyone to introduce themselves again. When it got to Zanil's turn, she swallowed hard. "Zanil Mthembu, head of marketing," she said softly. He looked at her this time, long and direct. "Mthembu," he repeated. "You shop at Galleria Supermarket, don't you?" The entire room went silent. Zanil's mouth went dry. Her colleagues looked confused, wondering why their CEO would ask such a question. Her lips trembled. I used to, she whispered. A faint smile appeared on his face, cold, unreadable. He turned to the others. All right, let's continue. The meeting went on, but Zanil didn't hear another word. She sat there in shock, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. He remembered her. Every moment of mockery, every tossed coin, every time she walked past him, he remembered it all. When the meeting ended, she gathered her files slowly, waiting for the others to leave. She wanted to speak to him, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But as she stood up, he said calmly without looking at her. Next time, Miss Mthembu, remember that life can change its direction faster than pride can blink. Her throat tightened. She couldn't speak. She simply nodded and walked out, her legs weak. That night, she couldn't hold it anymore. She took her car keys and drove to the supermarket. The same place where everything had started. It was dark and almost empty. She parked at the same spot and sat behind the wheel, staring at the gate. Memories flooded in. The sound of her heels on the pavement. The clink of the coin rolling on the floor, his calm eyes. She stepped out and stood where he used to sit. The ground was cold. Her tears fell freely. For the first time in her life, Zanil whispered a prayer, not for success, not for beauty, but for forgiveness. As she drove home that night, something in her heart shifted. The woman who once looked down on others was now learning to look up, at herself, at her mistakes, and at the humility she had never known she needed. The days that followed were heavy for Zanil. She went to work each morning, dressed sharply, her makeup perfect, her heels loud against the tiles. But inside, she was falling apart. Each time she caught a glimpse of Mr. Masko, she felt a sting in her chest. He didn't need to speak. His silence spoke louder than words. His success was a reminder of her shame. Every decision he made reflected wisdom she once thought a poor man could never have. Rumors started to spread around the office. Some said Zanil had a history with the CEO. Others said he had once been her lover, or that she had offended him in some way. She didn't bother to explain. What could she possibly say? That she used to throw coins at the man now sitting on the company's highest chair? Work became unbearable. Each day stretched endlessly. She could barely focus. Her projects started failing, and her confidence began to crumble. The same colleagues who once admired her now whispered behind her back. The pride that had carried her like a crown was now weighing her down like a stone. Then came the morning she would never forget. An email arrived, a notification of suspension pending investigation. It stated that her recent project had failed due to negligence and financial mismanagement. The tone of the message was cold, official, and final. She knew exactly who had authorized it. Zanil sat frozen for hours, staring at her computer screen. She felt like a stranger in a world she once ruled. The people she used to command now avoided her gaze. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from colleagues pretending to be concerned. She ignored them all. Later that afternoon, she was called into a boardroom meeting. The air was thick with judgment. Reports, graphs, and figures were placed before her. Her department's losses were highlighted in red. Her voice trembled as she tried to defend herself, but her words held no weight. When the meeting ended, she was told to step down temporarily until the matter was reviewed. It was humiliation in its purest form, public, silent, and complete. That night, Zanil went home to an empty apartment. The laughter of her friends was gone. The calls from men who once admired her had stopped. She sat on the floor of her living room and stared at her reflection in the glass table. For the first time, she saw not beauty, not confidence, but a woman stripped of everything she thought she was. Days turned into weeks. The company moved on without her. Her suspension turned into termination. The email came quietly one morning. Your services are no longer required. She didn't cry. She just sat still, numb, as the reality sank in. Everything she built on pride had collapsed. Her savings began to dwindle, her bills piled up, and her car was eventually repossessed. She tried applying for other jobs, but no company wanted her. Her reputation had already been stained. People whispered that she was difficult to work with, that she had disrespected the new CEO. Zanil began selling her jewelry to survive. Her designer handbags, her shoes, her perfumes, one by one, they disappeared. Her once vibrant apartment grew empty. Sometimes she would walk past the company gate, just to see the place again. Security guards who once saluted her now ignored her. The same people she used to overlook now looked down on her. There were days she didn't eat. Nights she couldn't sleep. She tried to reach out to old friends, but most had blocked her number or pretended to be busy. And then one morning, she woke up to a knock on her door. It was her landlord. He stood silently and handed her an envelope. Inside was a notice. She had 3 days to move out. Zanil stood there frozen. She had no money, no family to turn to, and no one to call. She spent the next 2 nights packing what was left of her life. A few clothes, some old documents, and a box of broken dreams. On the 3rd day, she dragged her bag outside and sat on the curb. The world moved around her. Cars passing, people hurrying to work, children laughing. None of it mattered. She sat there motionless, her heart heavy. She didn't realize when a black SUV stopped beside her. The tinted window rolled down slowly. A familiar voice called her name, calm, firm, and controlled. She turned and saw Mr. Masko staring at her from the car. His expression was unreadable. He didn't speak further. He didn't need to. He stepped out of the car, opened the back door, and stood silently. Zanil hesitated. For a moment, shame held her in place. Then slowly, she picked up her small bag and walked toward him. When she entered the car, she sat quietly, unable to lift her head. As the car drove away, tears rolled down her face. She didn't know where he was taking her. She didn't even care. All she knew was that her life, broken and stripped bare, had finally reached a place where pride no longer mattered. The car ride was silent. Zanil sat quietly, her hands folded on her lap, her heart pounding against her ribs. She didn't look at him. She didn't have the strength to. Every mile that passed felt like a slow confession, one she had no words for. After a long drive, the car stopped in front of a large community center on the edge of town. The walls were painted white but aged by time. Children played outside, their laughter echoing through the air. Women moved around with trays of food, and men fixed wooden benches near the gate. It was not a luxurious place, but it was alive, warm, and filled with something she hadn't felt in years, peace. He stepped out of the car and gestured for her to follow. They walked through the gate, and as they moved, people greeted him with respect and gratitude. Some hugged him, others waved from afar. It was clear he was loved there. Inside, she saw a large hall with computers, sewing machines, and shelves filled with books. At the far corner, a group of young women were learning tailoring. A sign on the wall read, "Second Chance Foundation, Empowering Lives." Zanil stopped walking. Her eyes moved slowly across the hall. Everything suddenly made sense. The man she once mocked was using his success to build lives, to give hope to those the world had forgotten. He turned to her, his expression still calm, but softer now. Without words, he handed her a set of files and pointed toward a small office. On the door was a name tag, Project Coordinator. Zanil's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She wanted to fall on her knees and cry. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to beg for forgiveness. But no words came. He walked away quietly, leaving her there, standing, trembling, overwhelmed. That day marked the beginning of her rebirth. Weeks passed. Zanil began working at the foundation. Her first tasks were small, organizing supplies, assisting teachers, cleaning offices. She did everything quietly, with humility she had never known before. Each morning she arrived early. Each evening she stayed behind to help. Slowly, the bitterness that once filled her heart began to fade. She learned to listen to people's stories, stories of pain, survival, and hope. She began to understand what it meant to live for something beyond pride and appearance. The foundation became her new home. The people there didn't judge her for her past. They saw her effort, her sincerity, her change. One afternoon, she stood by the gate watching a young girl trying to sell fruit to passing cars. The girl reminded her of the man she once mocked. Desperate, ignored, struggling. Zanil walked to her, bought everything the girl had, and handed her an envelope of money from her own pocket. The girl smiled, her eyes wide with gratitude. It was in that moment that Zanil felt true peace for the first time in her life. Months turned into a year. The foundation grew bigger, stronger, and more respected. Zanil was promoted to senior coordinator. Her dedication became an inspiration to others. People admired her for her compassion and quiet strength. She still saw Mr. Masko often. Their interactions were professional, calm, and respectful. He treated her with quiet regard, not as someone beneath him, but as someone who had found herself again. One evening, after a long day of work, Zanil stayed back alone in the office. She looked through the window at the children playing outside and smiled. She realized how much her life had changed, how much she had changed. The woman who once laughed at pain now worked to heal it. The woman who once walked with pride now walked with purpose. The woman who once chased luxury now chased meaning. Her reflection in the glass no longer frightened her. It no longer reminded her of shame, but of transformation. She remembered the moment when she first mocked that man at the supermarket. The arrogance, the laughter, the coin she tossed. And she remembered the man who had every reason to destroy her, but instead chose to give her a chance to rebuild her life. That realization broke her completely. She sat at her desk and wept, not out of pain this time, but out of gratitude. Because life had taken everything she thought she needed, only to give her everything she truly deserved. Months later, she began visiting schools, talking to young girls about humility, kindness, and the danger of pride. Her story spread quietly across the community. People listened, and many changed their ways after hearing what she had been through. One day, during one of her outreach programs, she stood before a group of students and shared her journey. When she finished, the entire hall fell silent. Then, applause broke out, not for her beauty or status, but for her strength, her truth, and her heart. Zanil smiled softly. Her past no longer haunted her. It had become her testimony. Years later, the foundation expanded into several African countries. Zanil became one of its directors, working hand in hand with the man who once sat outside a supermarket as a beggar. Together, they changed lives, quietly, consistently, and selflessly. And each time Zanil saw a proud, arrogant face in the crowd, she remembered the old her. The woman who once believed money made her better than others. The woman who laughed at pain. The woman who had to lose everything before learning what truly mattered. Now, she smiled whenever she saw the poor, not out of pity, but out of respect. Because she knew that behind every broken person could be a story waiting for a second chance. Moral lesson. Never look down on anyone, because the same person you mock today may hold the key to your redemption tomorrow.